housekeeping, keep Miss Delia happy. No cell phones during the meeting today, please. If you do have one still turned on, please put it on silent. The meeting is recorded and is live on YouTube, so that's why we ask for no distractions. And we would like for your presence on YouTube to be remembered in a good way. Right, Norman?
That's true.
Not in a bad way. Start off with roll call. And I just, before we get started, I know we're going to do something a little later on, but I just wanted to recognize the feelings that I have. This is the first advisory board meeting that I've been to without Mr. Sample, and the first one that's been held without Mr. Sample. And just a moment to recognize Mr. Sample, and we certainly appreciate the family being here, and thank you. It's hard to start it without him. It's all very hard. John Swafford's present. Mr. Joel Limley.
Here.
Douglas Oldmixon.
Here.
Norman Seaton.
Here.
Shelley Wiedner. Absent. Rick Stroud.
Here.
Present. So we're missing one. We do have a quorum. Do I entertain a motion for excusing Ms. Wiedner from the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we proceed without Ms. Wiedner present.
And the motion was made by Joel Limley to proceed without and excuse the absence of Ms. Wiedner. Seconded by Norman Seaton. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion carries. Before we get started, we have some new members, and we only meet once every 6 months to 18 months. Have each of the members go through and give a brief introduction of themselves. Start with you, Mr. Seaton.
I'm Norman Seaton. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. I'm a full-time college professor and part-time auctioneer, I guess you might say, and I enjoy everything.
I'm John Swafford. I reside in Willow Park, Texas, and started as an auctioneer the old-fashioned way, selling chip dishes, bowling balls, and log chains, and it got in my blood, and I've been involved with it since 1987, and love every minute of it.
And I'm Doug Oldmixon. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Real Estate Commission, and I've been around auctions all of my professional career as a real estate broker and attorney. But pleased to be part of this fine advisory board.
My name is Joel Emily. I'm from Blackwell, Texas, full-time auctioneer. This is what I do for a living. Deal mostly in purebred registered livestock sales as well as business liquidations, and also have an appraisal, personal property appraisal portion of what we do.
I'm Rick Stroud. I live in Bernie, Texas. Been in and around the auction business since I've been 8 years old. I've been licensed in the state of Texas since for about the last 11 years, 12 years now. So mostly do benefit and fundraising, but other things as well.
Thank you, gentlemen, and welcome to the board, Mr. Stroud.
Thank you.
We'll move along to item C, training for the board members. Ms. Della Lundquist.
Morning. I'm Della Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel. Guess you can probably hear me okay. Every year and a half, or with you, every year and a half, but we're supposed to every year go over these different statutes that you need to learn and understand because of your special role as board members. So it's time again for the board training. Come on. And it's kind of like when you're on an airplane and they have to do, by law, the training over and over again of what to do when we land and crash. We have to do this for you, so just bear with us. And you may learn some things that you didn't know before or take away something new. We'll start with the Open Meetings Act, but we'll also do the Administrative Procedures Act, otherwise known as the APA, and the Public Information Act, also known as the Open Records Act. The Open Meetings Act is primarily the statute that you'll be involved in. You know, we go through all the time, what are we going to put on the agenda, when are we going to post the agenda, that kind of thing. The primary purpose is to ensure that we have an open and transparent governmental process. Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. So because you are a board, only when you are a quorum can you take official action. So that's why at the very beginning of the meetings we make sure that we have a quorum. You can come in, Charlotte. And so with your board, a quorum is 4. So we have at least 4 people here today, so you can take official action. We have to post the notice. We post it at least 7 days prior to each meeting, excluding the date of the meeting and the date of posting. And we send it to the Secretary of State for posting on the internet. Again, a quorum is required to take any official action. If no quorum is here, we can continue the meeting, but there's no motions, nothing official can take place. The only time a quorum can act is in an open meeting. Otherwise, it's called an illegal closed meeting. So that's why we have to post it to invite the public. So it's kind of very important to be careful when you're out and maybe amongst each other, and we'll go over that at a party or some kind of social event. If there happens to be a quorum of you, that's when some dangers can take place if you start talking about official business with a quorum of other members. So just be aware that if you're gathered there at a social function or somewhere and there's a quorum of you, to not talk about official business. That's why when we have our work groups, we make sure that we have less than a quorum appointed to the work group. So if you go to a conference, convention, and workshop, and a quorum is present, they have an exception for that as long as you are, is your conversation about public business or public policy is incidental to the event and no formal action is taken. So you may be thrown together at a social event and it may be incidental. You don't have to go to separate corners of the room, but just be careful that you don't make any decisions or deliberate on anything official. Just always be aware of what's going on in the situation where you might be together outside of a board meeting, a noticed board meeting. Beware of the walking quorum. It's kind of a monster, and it can happen very quietly, and you don't even realize what's going on. If someone on the board sends an email or text or something to someone, and then other members of the board might respond, and then suddenly you have a quorum of you discussing a subject. So that's why we're very careful here when we send emails to you to ask you not to reply all or to just contact one of us rather than each of you, just to avoid even the appearance of a walking quorum. That can throw a lot of boards and commissions into danger. Beware that the walking quorum can occur during a conference call, a video conference, or even a hallway discussion. But it's most prevalent in emails, text messages, with the dangerous reply all. So just be aware of that. We are limited in the meetings to discussing what's posted on the agenda. So that's why we have to be very careful to make sure that the agenda items describe accurately what we're going to talk about, and that we don't devolve into some other topic that's not on the agenda. If there's something everybody really wants to talk about, the best thing we can do is put it on the next agenda item. If we have public comment, remember you can't engage with the public commenter, but again, you can put that on the next agenda as an item. So we specifically identify the items for the board agendas, limit discussions. There's always a penalty. Any interested person, including the media, may petition the courts to stop actions taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So if you're discussing or taking action on something that wasn't posted, we can say that it's a violation, and there are civil penalties and criminal penalties for board members who knowingly conspire to circumvent the open meetings. County jail. So just best practices, just be very aware that you are a special person because you're appointed to this governmental body And just be aware when you're with other members of the board, and to just confine the discussions to not items for business. And in the open meeting, just talk about what's on the agenda. In your materials, we have these resources for you. If you have questions, always you can call us, and that's our number at the General Counsel's office. Briefly, just the APA. The Administrative Procedures Act, what you'll be involved with primarily is rulemaking. So there's standards to notice the public again for what kind of rules and what rules we're going to publish, to provide public comment and public participation in the rulemaking process. A rule is just a statement made by an agency that implements, interprets, or prescribes law or policy, or describes the procedure or practice requirements of the agency. So that's why we're very involved here in rulemaking almost all of the time, because we have so many programs and there's so many bills and laws that touch this agency and what we do. So the General Counsel's office, where I work, is always usually in the process of writing or publishing or asking the commission or a board to look at a rule and then adopt a rule. Any interested person may petition adoption of a rule, and we'll have a public hearing. That looks like a complicated process, but it's our process to get rules ultimately adopted. It just starts with an idea. They're in the top, and we draft the rules. That's where our advisory boards are so important, to either appoint work groups or come before you to lay out the rules. Because without your help and support, our commission wouldn't really have a lot of good ideas and technical knowledge of what the rule is supposed to do. So we rely on you heavily for your input on the rules. Ultimately, you should see the rules at least twice before they're published, after they're published, and then before the commission adopts them. A rule becomes effective 20 days after filing, after they've been adopted. So there's two kinds of rule reviews or rule publications and actions that we do. One is rule review, which we're required by law to do every 4 years. Whether there's anything new or not, we're required to look at the rules every 4 years. Normally what we do is just re-adopt them if the statute is still around. And then in phase 2, we might make some changes. But TDLR has a little bit of a unique way of doing its rule review, but because we have so many programs, it is actually an efficient way to do it. Again, here's some rulemaking resources. I don't believe there's any current rules pending with this group, and I don't believe that the bill we'll discuss later will evolve in any rulemaking. So for the foreseeable future, I don't see rulemaking for the Auctioneer Board unless someone petitions or there's something you want to change. And last but not least, the Public Information Act, also known as the Open Records Act. Again, in the philosophy of transparency, the agency wants to make sure that if we have a document, by law, if we have documents here and someone asks us in writing, we have to give them to the people within a reasonable time, which is usually 10 business days. There are lots of laws that affect that and would require us to withhold things too, like things that are confidential, privileged, attorney-client, that kind of thing. So just because we have it doesn't mean everybody gets to see everything, but we start with the transparency, and then we have to look and see if there's any laws that might restrict what we give out. So if someone writes to us and says, I want all the enforcement file for XYZ, the enforcement division will give us in general counsel the entire file, and we go through it and determine if there's attorney-client privileged information, if there's anything we need to redact, like someone's personal email, date of birth, that kind of thing. People also could come up here and look at documents if they want to. Any document that's official business is subject to being made public, so again, on your own personal devices, if you text about business or if you on your computer you're discussing TDLR business, it could be subject to an open records request. And we have had people write in and ask for every email ever sent by commissioners or every email from certain people. So more and more people are turning to the open records process to find out information. So just be aware that if you're discussing a TDLR business and you've kept a record of it, it could be subject to a request. And that concludes the training. Do you have any questions?
Questions? Thank you very much, Stella.
See you in another year and a half.
Move along to item D, approval of the minutes as they were provided by Della in emails. Everybody had a chance to read them?
Sir, I've read them, and I make a motion, we accept them as distributed.
Motion's made by Norman Seaton.
Second.
Approved minutes, seconded by Joel Lemley. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Item E, public comment. I have not seen anybody. Do we have anybody that wanted to speak today to the board? None present. Move along to the staff reports, and we're going to move the executive report down in the process just a little bit to give Mr. Bryan time to get here. So we'll move along to C, Compliance Division.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Russell Tolley with the Compliance Division. I'm one of the program specialists for the Auctioneer program. I'm going to go over two items with you today. Well, first is personnel changes. My particular subset of the Compliance Division did comprise of three specialists, one of which, Roger Thormalin, retired last year. He helped out with the auctioneer questions. He's no longer available. I imagine he's spending a lot of time playing with his grandchildren. So right now, Russell Tolley and Lisa McDonald are the program specialists for the Compliance Division. We're available to help you with any of the questions you might have. The second item is legislation that might affect the auctioneer profession. There was a bill submitted, House Bill 3215, that does not change the auctioneer law, but changes the transportation code that would allow auctioneers to auction more vehicles than is currently allowed. At the time I wrote the report, House Bill 3215 had passed through the House and had been moved to the Senate. I have an update for you. Since that time, there was a committee substitute in the Senate that was passed and moved to the governor's desk yesterday. So it's very recent. The committee substitute is somewhat different than the original filing, so I'd encourage everybody to read through that. It's available online through the legislature's online web site. The web address for that is capital.state.tx.us, and you can look it up by entering Committee Substitute House Bill 3215. That is all I have for you. I'm available to you anytime via email or phone call if you have any questions or any projects you want me to work on. And that concludes my presentation. You have any questions?
Questions, Mr. Tolley?
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Tolley, thank you for that report. I assume that you have read HB 3215 in its final form, and does it change or does it preserve this clarification that auctioneers are not engaged in business as a dealer under the transportation code? Is that preserved in the substitute?
It is.
Okay.
It is somewhat expanded, actually. So in the committee substitute, I encourage everybody to read it. Yeah, so.
Well, I know, but we rely on you to translate it for us. or general counsel to translate it for us,
Yeah.
if in fact there's any nuances that we should be aware of.
Yeah, I can read you just the language. It used to say, I think, dealership, and now it just says, a licensed auctioneer is not engaging in business as a dealer by, as Della Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel, a licensed auctioneer is not engaging in business as a dealer, by, as a bid caller, selling or offering to sell property, including a business that holds the title to any number of vehicles to the highest bidder at a bona fide auction if, and then it stays the same. So it seems to preserve all of that, and even, like Russ said, expand it a little bit, so.
So it includes, that language includes businesses that hold title to essentially a fleet of vehicles, right?
Yes.
But how about the individual vehicles? That was the kind of the focus before. There was that artificial number of 4, and if you went over that, then that was a kind of the dealer loophole. Is that preserved?
All I'm looking at is what the change that the substitute made, but I could certainly get back to you on that.
I think it's important for us to educate our members about that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Tully. Item 3, education and examination.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Ray Pizarro, Director for the Education Examination Division. First, I want to welcome you all to the board. Hopefully Della didn't scare you too much on the administrative acts. One thing I would want to bring to your attention is that our division, we administer roughly about 60,000 exams a year for all of the industries we regulate. One being you guys. We do about 80 exams a year for you all. The stats are here in your notes. I would encourage you, at least 1 or 2 of you, to be part of that SME group, subject matter experts, to develop the items and look at the items and see if they're still good. We always like to have a board member part of that group. Joel, knowing your background, and as you've mentioned, and Rick, I think you guys will be really good about that. We can get, after the meeting, we can talk about it some more. But I would encourage that. We don't have a lot of SMEs in your industry that are stepping up to the plate to try to be part of this group, and it's important to have that group, those people there to vet the examinations.
Was that poll we sent out in January about people being on there?
That's correct, sir.
I filled that out, but there's been no response.
Okay. Well, we haven't concluded it because we haven't gotten a lot of applications. So we're trying to get a pool
Since
of
education
individuals.
is my game, I
Yeah.
would love to be on that.
Absolutely. Other things, we've acquired a lot of new programs since we've last seen each other, the board. We've acquired a lot of health profession programs, and also the driver education program. So we've been very diligent in administering those programs with from reviewing curriculum to administering examinations for some of those. So that's some of the things we've been looking at. July 2013 was the last time we looked at an exam. Now, I keep coming back to the exam. We're not administering a lot of them, so it's okay to have this lag time, other than other examinations where we have hundreds of people being tested a year. We got to look at those, but we really need to look at them, and if you're part of that, that would be really good. We are now using new technology in our division. We always like to look at new ways of doing things. One of the things that we've been doing since last we've met is utilizing what's called a touch point to look at all of the type of emails coming in and all of the type of phone calls we're getting, so that we kind of know where we're going. If we get the same type of questions coming in over and over, we know we need maybe more FAQs. And so we look at that for all of our industries and make sure we are providing the services that we need to provide for each of the industries we regulate. What else do we need to share with you guys? We also have school inspections. Our division now consists of inspecting schools that offer education, pre-education for those licensees who require it. And we would go out and inspect those schools to ensure that those schools are in compliance. We also have a component of sending a liaison out to try to educate the providers that we regulate. It's always good to inform them of what they need to do, how they need to, how they need to comply with the rules, what is required of them. So that is a learning tool, and it's one of in our strategic goals that's part of our charge, is to educate our industry and educate the providers. We also have a new search for the driver education. Probably we'll try to implement that to some of our other industries. It's a really neat way of searching who's licensed within the industry and who's offering what, like for CE and that kind of thing. So it's a pretty nifty tool. We got it with driver education, since their commerce on how they administer from driving safety to driver education, and you have parents going out there to try to find a course for their loved ones. So it's a really good interactive tool, and we may be able to migrate that to other industries as well. That's all I have for now for you guys. If you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Pissarro.
Yep.
Item 4, Enforcement Division.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Charlotte Melder, and I'm one of the prosecutors in the Enforcement Division. In case you don't know, the Enforcement Division is the division of the agency that deals with complaints. Our intake section takes in the calls that come in, and our investigators investigate those cases. Then they come to a prosecutor, and we have the option of closing the case if there's not evidence of a violation. We can send a warning if the violation is not too severe, or we can issue what's called a Notice of Alleged Violation, or what we call an NOAV. If an NOAV goes out, the auctioneer has the opportunity to contact us, settle the case with us, or argue it or take it to hearing. Or if they don't respond at all, a default order is entered, and then they owe the penalty. It becomes a final order. So the cases that I have in front of you, we have an array of situations. Unfortunately, every case on here has to do with not paying a seller. So if you start back at the very bottom, in June and September of 2016, we had 2 separate orders entered against a Johnny Ray Norman. The first one was a commission order. That means it went to a hearing, and then the commission heard the case, and they upholded a penalty of $2,500 for failing to pay the seller. The second case against him was a default. This time he just let it go to default. He was assessed a $4,000 penalty, and his license was revoked for failing to pay the original penalty. He has paid $225 towards that over $6,000 penalty, but we did have to issue recovery fund to the harmed parties in those cases. The next one was August and October of 2016. Again, 2 default orders, this time against a Richard Allen Collins. His license has expired, and it's not able to be renewed because he owes penalties and recovery fund needed to be paid. He was $10,000 for 3 counts of failing to pay a seller and not providing information for the purposes of directing complaints to the department. We did issue recovery fund in those cases. December of 2016, a default order was entered against 2 cases against a Kimberly Lynn Combs Miller. She was assessed $6,000 for 2 counts of failing to pay a seller. Again, recovery fund was issued. December 20th through 28th, 6 default orders were entered against Daniel Gill. His license had been revoked already in 2014. In these most recent cases, he had an administrative penalty of $39,000, 5 counts of failing to pay a seller, 3 counts of failing to cooperate with an investigation, 2 counts of interfering with an investigation, etc. Recovery fund was paid, unfortunately not enough to cover the losses, but what we could cover by law. And then most recently in January of 2017, a default order was entered against Michael Joseph Kaluz. His license was revoked in June of 2015 previously as well. And in this most recent case, he was issued penalties for $6,500 for failing to pay a seller, failing to keep records, and failing to cooperate with an investigation. So, as you see, it's kind of the same theme. And these aren't all the cases. These are just the ones that I chose to highlight because they were multiple cases and higher penalties and the same theme. And if you look down at the key statistics, you'll see number of cases opened and number of cases resolved. We've actually resolved almost all of them, so we try to keep up with this program in these cases. You'll see that our penalties assessed were fairly high and the collected were fairly low. Unfortunately, that's because if they respond and they take care of their situation, the penalties are lower, they pay the penalty and they move on. If they ignore it, it goes to default, the penalties are higher, and we don't usually collect on those. So, and it's not quite on par with the rest of the programs with TDLR. There's quite a bit of non-payment in the auctioneer field. So that's pretty much all I have for you today, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
So how much was paid, pardon me, how much was paid out on the recovery fund for these? Those amounts weren't listed.
I did not list them because they were different in each case. I can tell you on the Daniel Gill one, I think it maxed out at the 30,000 or whatever it is. The other ones, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, it was about 5,000 to 6,000 per person that needed to be paid out. One was only $410, I think, but most of them were around the several $1,000 range.
So do you have the balance of the recovery fund? Who has?
I do not.
Jerry will
Okay.
do it on his financial services report.
Perfect, okay. Norman, did you have a question?
How many people are in your staff nowadays?
We have 16 prosecutors. We have two of them, myself and the other senior prosecutor who are assigned the auctioneer cases.
Considering all the stuff you do, I'm very impressed with your
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that.
On these cases that are opened, how many of these are, first of all, how are these assessed? How are you getting these complaints? Are they coming from the website, or is it coming from written complaints?
The majority of our cases are filed with complaints that come in online. If you go to our website, there's a file a complaint button, and you
Right.
can quickly and easily file a complaint. Our intake division gets them mostly from consumers or people who have done an estate sale or something and never been paid for their mom's legacy, and so and a lot of them try for up to a year or two trying to get this payment. Oh, I'll pay you. Oh, I'll pay you, and then don't get paid, and then finally file their complaints.
How long do they have to file a complaint with?
Typically 2 years. It's not a hard and fast rule, but 2 years is really what we look for by statute.
Douglas, do you have anything?
I just one question, thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Chair, in the order of, or the matter of Michael Joseph Kalous,
Mhm.
I noticed on all of the rest of them, there's recovery fund orders had been signed. Is there a pending recovery fund claim in this particular case, or do you know?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I should know that answer, and I don't.
Thank you.
I know that I would have put if there had been a recovery fund case.
Yeah, done.
And so I'm assuming that there wasn't one, and usually that's because he actually paid the seller. So I don't know, though. I can find out before y'all leave today.
Any other questions?
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much, Sharp. Before we go to financial, do you want to go back to Brian, or?
Let's knock out financial. Jerry's, he can really suck the air out of the room. So we'll let
Come
Jerry
on
do
down,
that.
Jerry. Item 5.
We'll let Jerry do that. And then,
Jerry Daniels with Financial Services.
Welcome, Jerry.
It's been a bad year for the Auctioneer and Education and Recovery Fund. I don't know if do you all have the handouts that were part of the?
Yep.
Okay. The balance at April 30th was $335,789. Since then, we've paid 2 more claims, one for $15,000 and one for about $780. So the balance at this morning at 8 o'clock was $320,714. What that means for the licensed auctioneers, once the balance of the fund goes below $350,000 at December 31st of any given year, then everyone who renews is charged an additional $50 to replenish the fund. Normally, it's just the new licensees that pay into the fund, but like I say, once the balance dips below 350,000, then every renewal is charged an additional $50. Are there any questions about the report? Or
So if it stays below 350, which we assume it will, as I don't anticipate a big influx of new auctioneers coming in to make it up, beginning next year in 2018, we'll implement the additional $50 to each license
beginning in January?
renewal,
Yes.
beginning in January.
And that will go on for a year. If it brings the balance up above 350,000, then we'll shut it off at December 31st.
And do you know the number of licensed auctioneers in the state?
No, I do not.
You'll have that in a moment? Right here. Okay. I was trying to get, where's that number gonna take us after 1 year?
Well, let me ask you this, that meaning that basically auctioneer license are gonna double this next year?
If they're $50 now, yes, they will be.
Okay, so
$100.
they're gonna be now $100 a year.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
And that'll continue probably for a couple of years.
If there are not a whole lot more claims, it should only last 1 year.
Okay. Any questions for Jerry? Thank you very much, Jerry. You were right, he did suck the wind out of it.
You know, one of the things that Jerry said, Brian Francis, Executive Director, one of the things that Jerry started off the presentation saying that the fund took a hit, but that's exactly what the fund's there for. And there were consumers that were made whole. And at the end of the day, that's what the fund is there for. If there are people that are harmed by a licensee, the fund's there for them to be made whole, or to the extent they can be. That's part of the
And
process.
in my career as an auctioneer, with all the gentlemen I work with, including myself, I have never had one auctioneer complain about having to contribute to the fund.
It works in this case. It really does.
This is so much better than it was before we had the fund. Had to pay it every year.
So now we'll move back up to item 1, Mr. Brian Francis.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, Executive Director with TDLR, and I apologize for being late, but the 7th grader was going to the 8th grade, and she actually got an award today. And right before the program was going to start, I got there early. You know, I'm going to dart out the door, and when it goes in, and of course, after all the kids got in, the fire alarm goes off. And so we're all piled outside the building, and you can imagine how difficult it was to get these rowdy 7th grade kids back in, and the happy parents that were there, right? But anyhow, I was very proud of her, and I apologize for running a little late. Today's an important meeting for us. We're going to do a couple of things. If it's okay, I'd like to do the legislative update first.
Okay.
I know that Russ has touched on the specific bill that impacts auctioneering, but I'd like for Nick to lay out just the overall legislative efforts that TDLR undertook, and I'll go through some of the bills that we're tracking that impact our agency, and I'll have Delia pass it out to you.
Great, thank you. Nick Voinas, Chief of Staff, TDLR. As you can imagine, over the last few months, a main focus has been the 85th session of the Texas Legislature. The House and the Senate adjourned in January, and, convened in January. And
That was wishful thinking.
yeah, really. And met through Memorial Day this past Monday. This session, more than 6,500 bills were filed, and of those, TDLR staff tracked a total of 336 bills, and those included 130 that were directly related to current TDLR programs, 20 dealt with new or transfer programs, and another 186 bills that, if enacted, would have affected agency operations. Of those bills we monitored, we're still watching 67 of them. 10 have already been signed into law by the governor, and 57 have been sent to the governor for his consideration. And those numbers include the bill that Russ mentioned earlier, House Bill 3215 by Representative Craig Goldman. Just want to wrap it up by saying it was a total team effort with the TDLR staff. Worked hard analyzing, monitoring bills, and providing feedback and resource testimony. Thank you.
Good job, Nick. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to chime in there. As you're aware, we go through the strategic planning process every 2 years. And one of the things that I like to stress is that that process is valuable. The conversations and hearing what changes can happen, but also there are very tangible results that come out of it. And I just wanted to share those with you. The document that Delia provided with you. So if you look at that first cluster of bills, those were directly out of the strategic planning process. Those are initiatives that came through the conversations we've had with our licensees, with our staff, to say what are things that we don't need to do anymore. And I know it's kind of rare for government to say that there are things that we should not be regulating, but in terms of what is the statewide impact, what's the consumer protection component associated with it, there are some things that we shouldn't have to do at this level, or that somebody shouldn't have to have a statewide license to engage in that business. In that first group, you'll see the legal service contracts, the towing program as it relates to booting. That's a program that will be deregulated. Barbering and threading, we're going to make it clear that threading is no longer picked up under this requirement. Shampoo apprentice and specialty certificates. And then if you go into the other one, it's like vehicle protection products and temporary common workers are included in 20,000 or 2065. A lot of stuff. That's going to change the way we do business, but people are very concerned about, man, TDLR, your plate's filling up. And it is, but this is an opportunity for us to clear some of our plate off. And so these changes are going to free up agency resources. It's going to free up the calls that are related to these very one-off programs. You know, having just, 19 vehicle protection product warranters throughout the state, and you get that question or call every 4 months, your staff's not as sharp on that particular issue. So getting some of those off our plate is going to help tremendously. And that next group where you see the cleanup initiatives, 4007, in a nutshell, I would say that that bill in and of itself represents about 4 years worth of legislative effort and success for any agency. It is incredible the amount of information that's in there. There's about 13 programs that are impacted, but there are little nuggets included in that bill that are going to change the way that we do business. One of them provides for an advisory board for the massage program, which will be taken over on November 1. Well, imagine going into that very complex, very involved program and industry and not having a group to bounce industry issues off of. It would have been difficult and challenging, and I would dare say really insurmountable for the agency to focus on that. There are other little pieces in there that we were able to identify elements in their statutes that limited business, that prevented somebody from getting into business. For the hearing instrument fitters, they had a provision that said if you were the CEO of a company, so I'm going to resurrect Sam Walton. So Sam Walton's back here today and he wants to open up a hearing instrument fitter business within the Walmart. He would actually have to become an individual hearing instrument fitter himself. So if the CEO has to hold a license, all the partners had to hold a license. That provision is removed, and now it frees up those barriers. It removes those barriers to entry. Another one that was in the hearing instrument fitter program was the requirement that if you sponsored a trainee, then that sponsor had to sign, notarize, and seal and mail the hours that trainee completed to the agency. So it just completely did away with the ability to do it electronically. We try to identify those barriers to technology, which will allow us to be smarter, quicker in the way that we deliver our services, and overall, it's going to allow us to lower our cost. Secondary issues included the driver education program, expanding the number of folks that can do a parent-taught program, really critical issue for us. It's going to reduce a lot of the phone calls that we have. 2738 and 2739 are much needed barber changes that we need in that area. It's going to allow us to have, Mr. Stephen, on the cosmetology side, you have the community colleges that offer a cosmetology program. Well, they had to maintain it in clock hours and not credit hours. This is going to allow TDLR to set up a mechanism that will allow conversion or formula, allows to identify those programs that are in clock hour and convert to credit hour, and credit hour convert back to clock hour. It's going to make a world of difference for those students that are transferring between those programs. Just a little fix like that's going to allow us to be smarter and better. I know Mr. Oldmixon, he can appreciate the level of effort that it takes just to monitor 15 bills, 20 bills, and it just gets exponential when you have this many, and particularly at the end of the session. I'm proud of what the staff has done. A lot of the credit goes to the efforts of the folks that were back and forth over at the Capitol, but the real effort are the staff that's been working on these issues for the last 2 years, the staff that stays here and answers the phone calls. You complimented Charlotte for the complaints resolved. Well, they still had to do the work while we were over there at the Capitol. They still have to make TLR shine by answering those phone calls. And so I'm really proud of that effort that the team has. And now we're going to roll up our sleeves and start undertaking what we call bill implementation. And I think it's what separates us a lot from a lot of the other agencies. How do we get the bills enacted? Do we get the systems up in place, or the programming done? Are the forms updated? Are we able to answer those phone calls? One of the new programs that came under TLR's watch on Monday is the transportation network companies. Those are the ride-sharing vehicle companies. Well, the staff had the web page, the FAQs, the bill up within an hour, actually within 20 minutes of the governor signing that bill into action. That's how quickly the team works, and they were ready to do it on Memorial Day. They knocked it out. So that's the type of effort that we have here, and I'm proud to be associated with this team of folks. I'm available to answer any questions on the legislative update.
Any questions?
One of the things that on our webpage, we provide an update in terms of all the bills that impact the very specific programs. So it's not a hide and seek thing. People are going to know what's out there. But also, as we start developing the rules that are associated with implementing, we'll start doing listservs saying, this rule's out there, this bill changed, September 1, you need to start doing X. So there's a lot of effort to make sure people are in the loop, because it's their livelihood. We want to make sure that they get it right.
Can you give us a little synopsis of 3215?
3215, very, very cleanly, it doesn't impact TLR directly, but it impacts our licensees. It allows them to sell auto vehicles without having to become a dealer over there, and I think that's a big difference. If you have a dealership that's going out of business and they have 15 vehicles, that auction now can engage in that for that dealership, and that's a big deal. I think the dealerships are going to be better served by having auctioneers that can increase the value of those liquidation sales and when they're trying to get rid of that inventory. And now our licensees don't have to have the specter or fear of having to have dual regulation when they're just trying to help somebody out move their inventory.
Okay. So the purpose of it and the nuts and bolts of it is they can go to a business liquidation, say an electrical company that wants to sell off all of their vehicles, and they can sell all of that off.
Absolutely. And not be considered a dealer.
Are there any limitations on it?
In following the statute, I didn't see any limitations, as long as it's for that one business and it's that inventory tied to it.
Okay.
You can't go get the owner's, nephew's car and his grandmother's vehicle and say, I'm gonna throw this one in there as well. But if it's associated with that business, then I think it's a great deal.
Mr. Olmixon, do you have any other questions about it?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm fine.
Any other questions on the board? Thank you very much. Mr. Francis?
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is, like I said, this is an important meeting for a lot of us. We want to honor our friend, Mr. Big Smile, Big Hug, Mr. Big Everything. He was a voluntary de facto employee of TDLR because he took thousands of phone calls on our behalf. But I blame him. He gave out his phone number, and he loved calling me saying, Brian, I took another call. And I'm like, Jim, that check's still in the mail.
I think you made him put his phone number on the business card.
I think I may have done that a little bit. But we want to honor Jim Sample. And so I'd like for Russ to come up first and say a few words. I'm sorry, Lee. I'm going to tell you right now, guys, I'm going to be flustered. Jim's my guy. I love him.
We started off a little flustered in
Yeah.
that same way this morning.
Yeah, Lee, I'm sorry about that.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Lee Parham. I'm the manager of the Regulatory Programs Group in the Compliance Division. That's where the Auctioneers program is located. I want to start off before our presentation to recognize Mr. Sample and give you a little bit of background on some of his accomplishments and some of his history. Now, these are just highlights. There's more to it. But Jim attended the Walter Britton Auction School in 1981. And from there, he pursued his passion as an auctioneer. He became a member of the Texas Auctioneers Association, TAA, in 1982. Didn't take long for him to get into the association. Here's some of Jim's accomplishments during his time with TAA. Excuse me. He served on numerous committees and earned the status of Senior Champion Auctioneer in 2003. Also, he was awarded the President's Leadership Award in 2003. He was a Hall of Famer, inducted into the TAA Hall of Fame in 2010. He also served as board president from 2011 to 2012. We all know what the Green Book is, the Green Book. Jim was instrumental in helping us create the TAA Green Book for Auctioneers. He also assisted in the drafting of House Bill 135 from a previous session related to the auctioneer license requirements. Now here's the hard part. Jim leaves us with an impressive legacy that honors the trust of all Texans and ensures the regulatory process is not heavy-handed or arbitrary. Most importantly, and I'll conclude here, Jim was a pleasure to work with, and he will be greatly missed by all who knew him.
So, man. So Jim also had my phone number. So, and I remember early on in our relationship, and I've got to call it that because it's just like any budding relationship, it was rocky at first. He liked me, I know he did, you know, because I was a Bobcat, so we shared that Bobcat bond. But we were in a meeting and he was saying something, and he was wrong. He was just wrong about it. But you know, Brian, it's not, if you look at the law and you read it, and I'm thinking, dude, I can read. I'm reading it. Ms. Sample, that's not how it is. Ms. Sample, that's not how it is. Brian, you're just wrong. You know, I've been married twice. I'm used to hearing that as well. So I get it. And so we leave that meeting, and he's hot as the world's biggest tick. He's just a giant, he was just so upset at me. And he called me the next week. He said, Brian, I just can't believe you got it so wrong. I said, Mr. Sample, you're so wrong. And we're going back and on the phone, and my executive assistant leans in the door. I'm okay. I'm talking to my friend Jim. So we go back and forth, and so I literally read the language out the law. I said, did you hear that word, the magic word? What magic word? And? Well, I'll be. Brian, I've never seen that and before. And we laughed so much, but that's how we could talk. That's the relationship we had. I could still be the regulator. Jim could still be the mentor and the educator for me. He could help me understand the nuances of this very unique industry. You guys are not normal. You do things that are different, but if you go to an auction and you watch the passion
of the folks that are selling those items and the relationship they have developed with the items they're selling and the family that's selling those items, you see that there is a family. There's something family about an auctioneer and an auctioneering event. And that's what Jim embodied. He embodied that so much with us. He's a special guy. I'm really going to miss him a lot. I want to do a couple of things. If I could get Charlene and Renee to come up here real quick. I'm so glad you guys are here. It means a lot. Jim meant a lot to us, and he left a mark. He left this legacy that I'm afraid that we're not going to live up to. We're going to try our best, but we want to give you guys a few things. This is for you. Okay. Renee. If I could, I'd like to read the that's my signature. You can't read it, so that's why we typed underneath there my name, because Jim would be what is that? Chicken scratch there, Brian. And he'd have that same, yeah, he'd have that same one tie on, you know, the one he always wore, which I love seeing. I love that. Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation Certificate of Recognition and grateful appreciation of James Jim Sample for his unwavering dedication in serving the citizens of Texas for 17 years. TDLR thanks you, Jim. For his servant leadership as presiding officer of the Auctioneer Advisory Board and his common sense approach to the regulation of the auctioneering industry, TLR thanks you, Jim. For his love of the auctioneering industry, for his passion for people, for his commitment to mentor and sharing his knowledge, and a kind word, TLR thanks you. For sharing the wit, wisdom, and guidance of a great husband and father who is missed by all. Sample family, TLR thanks you. It's awarded to Charlene, Renee, and Trent this 31st day of May. Signed, Brian Francis, Executive Director and friend of Jim Sample. We love you guys so much. He's a great man. And Doug's over there, he's like, I don't get the hug and kiss on my licensees like that. Securities industry is a completely different animal, my friend. This is the auctioneering industry. It's nothing but family up in here. Would you like to say a few words?
I want to thank y'all for this opportunity too, and our family appreciates it very much. This is one thing that Jim loved to do. It was his passion. He wanted everybody to know the law. He wanted everybody to be in compliant with it. Yes, he did. But I appreciate it, and thank you so much.
And I know that after the meeting concludes, we have some refreshments in the back that we'll spend some time and just, I know that Lisa's going to be doing her report, but there's a number of us that have some stories about Jim. I'll leave this with Renee. What's up, Trent? Peace in the Middle East. All right.
Thank you very much, Brian. Very well done. Item number 6, Licensing Division.
Actually, it's Charlotte again. I had 3 people furiously searching upstairs and emailing and texting me the answer to your question. In the case that you asked if there was a recovery fund case, there was not. And the reason is because one of the violations was failing to keep records. There was no contract that was able to be produced and no accounting of what was sold or not sold. So although we know the auction was held, there was money due, there was no way to determine how much, so there was no recovery fund case. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Now item number 6. It's Lisa.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Hodek, licensing manager.
Morning.
It's
kind of hard to follow.
Yes, it is.
Nice, very nice tribute. I too will miss Jim, and he had my phone number too, and he used it many times. And I knew without a doubt who he was when he called. But I did love the man, and I will miss him greatly. And now I will try to perform the business as I need to. So, my report, I have started with fiscal year 2013 through second quarter 2017. And the reason I decided to start with 2013 was when the associate auctioneers were eliminated, and that was with House Bill 3038. And then in September 1, 2015, House Bill 2481 came into effect, and then that is when we started reissuing associate auctioneer licenses in February 2016. So I did my report kind of based around that. I wanted to show you the difference of the numbers as they used to be. The last total population for associate auctioneers in 2013 was 206. In second quarter of this year, we're now up to 62. So it is climbing. I anticipate that it will continue to climb. And our auctioneer numbers, we are, total license population is 2414. And that pretty much concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions from the members? I think you got off easy.
I'm glad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis. So at $50, that would put us at $120,700 for the year, at $50 for that. So
For the
that'll
recovery
be more
fund
than
next
enough
year,
to
yeah.
replenish it.
Okay.
To replenish.
Item G, recommendations for agenda for the next item, or for the next board meeting, pardon me. Mr. Norman?
Hello, my name is Norman Seaton, and how do I want to say this? When I read all the directions, I'm going, how much can I really say and how much should I not say? So I'm going to read these basically as they are, and then I will open up with one explanation. I have a feeling only one person in here is really going to understand what I'm saying, and that would be Brian. I want to thank you for the little explanation on the community college and all that, because this is what this is all about. I'll just say that up front. Okay, these are education-related agenda items, and I'm saying that because of the announcement last time that we're now in the education one. And I'm going, okay, we need to join together. Okay, I'm recommending that we discuss an official alignment with TDR educators, Texas Educational Institutes, and the 60 by 30 Texas Marketable Skills Strategic Plan, which I have a copy here that I'm very willing to leave with TDLR. I am recommending that we discuss implementing training for Texas auctioneers and Texas citizens in the use of mobile technologies to research related selling goods and services to state, local, and national, global, and this is commonly called Google searches. And there's reasons I've put all these in here incidentally. I'm recommending that we discuss incorporating introductory level business training into the auction school's agenda based on Texas business codes. A lot of them out there, but I'm not supposed to explain, I'm sorry. I'm recommended that the TDLR Education and School Services, this new division, look at what I proposed here, so when we have the next meeting, then we can address it properly. That's my four, and if you want to ask me questions, I'm very willing to answer them. This is educational terms, and I'm not too sure how easy it is to understand.
We'll definitely have Ray and his staff reach out to you directly. But
Okay.
I see the thread, and I see the approach.
So do we need, is that all we need to put these on the agenda? Do we need a motion for that? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're checking to see if there's an education work group, is there?
I don't believe there's one appointed, this is Della Lindquist, yet, and we can't do it today because it's not on the agenda, it would be an action, but for the next time, if you talk to Mr. Seaton, we could have a educational, subcommittee or work group appointed, 2 or 3, to look into some of these items.
And
Yeah,
we'll
okay.
start working on it in between then as well, so.
Thank you.
It won't be a.
I will make this statement. I'm watching all the education bills like you did, and I was very impressed. They're very widespread. And then right at last, everything went bananas, and I have no idea what's gonna cross the governor's desk. I told you you'd understand that.
It definitely did.
Item H, discussion, date and time, location of the next board meeting. Do we have, or before I move on to that, do we have any other items for the agenda on the next meeting? None for that. Thank you. Now we'll move along to item H. Discussion, date and time, location of the next board meeting. Do we have anything that we need to schedule? I know that we want to be respective of your time, the agency's time, and you have a lot of board meetings coming up.
We've got a few.
In the next bit. So unless somebody has a time, I will suggest we leave that to.
We'll probably look at maybe the October timeframe. That'll give Ray and his staff have a lot of work to do early summer, and then the first part of our fiscal year, which begins in September. But we should have the ability to have them looking at some of these educational issues, and we'll also parlay our conversations in regard to the credit hours with the community colleges to see if we can build on that as well.
Let me make one statement. As I watched this go in there, I thought, this is the best thing that's happened to education. This is one time when I'm looking at legislation, I'm gonna say, I love it, I love it, I love it.
It's exciting.
It's been going on for years.
Good stuff.
Is anybody leaving the country this fall for 3 months and won't be able to attend, or?
Not yet.
Fall sounds good for everybody? All right. In that case, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move adjourned.
Steve moves for adjournment. Second.
Second?
Douglas Olmixon, the second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I just don't really want it to end, but meeting's adjourned.